Hello, and welcome in that advanced studio guide on the material editor.
In this video, we will cover the matte editor basics, so let's get started. What is the matte editor, you might ask? Well, it's a plugin that allows you to edit materials. Joke aside, it does what it says. Now, what are materials? It's basically a bunch of parameters and specific textures that are applied to a 3D item. Without material, it's just empty. Time to look at the editor for now. I like to split it in 4 different categories. The first being the meshes display option and shadow settings. Second one, have the whole material section properties that lie right under it. But also the shader used, which will change everything, and also the render queue setting. Third part is basically all the different textures stash. And lastly, the sliders and value input for all different parameters are here. Since we know a bit more about the category, we will go through a quick rundown that explains that most used and basics things you need to know about everything mentioned. The first nice thing we can see is that if you hover your cursor above most of the buttons, a tooltip shows up to explain what it does. Now let's take a look at the renderer category. We can see a little box to toggle that specific mesh of the model from being rendered or not. Then we do have multiple options about shadows casting, to let the item receive or cast shadows, off to disable shadows, on or two-sided to enable them, and shadows only to hide the item but keep the shadow cast. The last checkbox is to toggle the received shadows on the item. Fairly simple. Now for the second part, here you can swap the shader of the item, but we will talk about that in a moment. Same goes for the render queue. It's mostly used with transparent items overlapping, which will be seen in the third material editor guide. We will also keep the texture part for the second material editor guide, so let's skip them for now and hop on the sliders and setting part. We can see at first a bunch of color settings. A mesh can normally have up to 3 different colors. The normal color is, well, the color of the part of the item based on the color mask. Items without color mask, on the other hand, like the bucket, cannot be colored with that specific shader. The one followed by an _2 are the colors of the pattern. On this backpack, for example, there is also the pattern UV color, which are never used and kinda does funky stuff. Better to ignore that. Then we have the shadow color at the bottom, in case it's too bright or too dark. Now keep in mind that all shaders are different. Some will have the outline color option, some have way too many. But for now, we should get back on our standard one and check out every slider. The first one is pretty self-explanatory. It's there to disable or enable the shadow received by the item, but with more control. The ramp one basically enhances shadows on the item when no ramp texture is applied, else it will follow the given texture, but usually we don't deal with that, to be honest. Same for the 2 next one. It's small enhancement from the detail and line texture and isn't really useful. Then we do have the emission power. That one only works with glowing items. Same rule apply. It follows the given texture. The line width to control? Well, the line width, not use text specular, is used only if you want to use your own specular texture or disable the shiny effect on an item. Following with a bunch of sliders only used by patterns, I usually avoid them. And now, quite a few interesting one, the rim power and V. For those that doesn't know what the rim lighting is, it's a toon shader technique that add a little glow on the edge of the material based on your camera angle. The power determine how big the rim lighting is, and the V slider is basically how faded the lighting is. You can disable the rim completely by putting the V slider at 0. Now for the shadow extend, it darken a specific texture of the item to make the shadow deeper. As for the shadow extend another, that one is linked with the another ramp slider we mentioned before, and then the specular height and power. Those one are incredibly useful when it comes to add a shine effect to an item. If we turn up the power and rotate the item to face the light, you can now see it shining. 0 means no shine, 1 means sharp shine, and anything in between is faded. As for the height, it usually just nudges the shine position depending on the material and item. There is a few other sliders that are good to know on different shaders, but we will see them in time when needed. In the second guide about the material editor, we will talk about all different textures and masks and blah blah blah. Then during the third, learning about all the different and most used shaders, plus everything that deal with transparency. After that, you should be ready to go. Just a few extra things before we end. To edit and open the material editor, you have to select the item first in the workspace. Then click on the matte editor button at the bottom. Keeping the matte editor on while selecting another item, open the new item within. You can copy the material changes from one item to another using those buttons. The matte editor is the same in the Koikatsu Studio. One item can have a lot of meshes that can be toggled on or off. The same applies for the shadow settings. That should sum up for that guide. Have fun!